Lois Griffin, the iconic matriarch of the Griffin family, has become notorious for her increasingly erratic and often psychotic behavior over the years. Though she may have started as a relatively typical sitcom mom, Lois's actions have evolved into something far more unsettling. Time and again, she displays behavior that leaves viewers wondering just how far she will go to satisfy her personal desires or to deal with frustration.
My purse.
Her descent into madness is evident in numerous episodes where she engages in acts that range from selfish to downright psychopathic.
Not my space, get out! But get out of my house!
In this comprehensive breakdown, we will explore 10 episodes where Lois Griffin goes from a suburban mom to a full-fledged psychopath. This episode serves as a somewhat mild introduction to Lois's psychotic tendencies, but it still sets the stage for how unhinged she can become. The episode begins with Stewie having a nightmare. In this terrifying dream, Stewie finds himself naked in front of his classmates, while Lois, heavily intoxicated, menacingly tells him to run away from a monster. Stewie, in the throes of his subconscious, is clearly struggling with feelings of fear and anxiety, and his mother appears as a monstrous figure, reflecting how even in his dreams, Lois's presence can be unsettling. The nightmare eventually shifts to a more dreamlike setting, a dinner party at Quagmire's house, but Stewie's interactions with the monster continue to haunt him. As he spirals deeper into fear, Stewie wakes up traumatized. The experience leaves him so shaken that he insists on sleeping with his parents, a regression to childhood fears that even Stewie's usual tough exterior cannot mask. However, things don't get easier from there. Stewie's restlessness and anxiety lead to a chaotic night of kicking and flailing in bed, making it impossible for Peter to sleep. Desperate for peace, Peter leaves the room to find another place to rest. Unfortunately for him, the couch is already occupied, as the family furniture has seemingly taken a weekend vacation to Couchcella, a play on the popular music festival Coachella, complete with the joke about a headlining band named the Futon Fighters. With no other options, Peter finds himself sleeping on the kitchen table, a comically miserable situation that only adds to the bizarre nature of the episode. Meanwhile, Lois goes about her day as if nothing is out of the ordinary. Her routine includes picking Peter's dirty clothes out of the toilet, a metaphor perhaps for her constant frustration with her family's lack of responsibility, and reminding him about the laundry hamper, a task that has clearly become futile. This scene subtly demonstrates how Lois's patience is constantly tested, laying the groundwork for the more psychotic behavior that will emerge later. As the episode progresses, Peter decides to escape the chaos of the household by transforming the attic into his personal man cave, complete with insulation fights between him and his friends. Lois, understandably, becomes increasingly frustrated with Peter's blatant disregard for his responsibilities and the growing mess in the house. When Lois asks Peter to take out the trash, Peter arrogantly pulls out a coupon that he gifted himself for their anniversary, granting him a free pass from chores. This comical exchange is emblematic of Peter's immaturity, but it also highlights the brewing tension between him and Lois. Lois's patience finally snaps when Peter continues to avoid his responsibilities, and she takes drastic action. In a fit of anger, Lois locks Peter and his friends in the attic, trapping them without food, water, or air circulation. At this point, it becomes clear that Lois's behavior has crossed the line into something far more dangerous. She shows no remorse for locking her husband and his friends in a confined space, reminiscent of a true crime documentary where someone holds others captive for extended periods. Peter, of course, pleads for his release, but Lois remains steadfast in her decision even when Peter threatens to soil her beloved wedding dress. It's only when Cleveland offers to follow through with Peter's threat that Lois relents. However, by the time she breaks down the attic door, it's too late. Cleveland has already made good on his threat, leaving Lois's wedding dress soiled and ruined. The situation ends with both Lois and Peter acknowledging that they may have gone too far. But it's clear that Lois's ability to rationalize extreme behavior has already been well established. This moment of self-awareness is fleeting, and it only hints at the depths Lois is willing to sink to in future episodes. This episode, while relatively mild compared to others on this list, showcases Lois's capacity for extreme actions when she's pushed to her limits. The fact that she could lock her husband in the attic without any provisions, simply because he refused to do his chores, indicates that she is willing to take drastic measures to assert control over her household, even at the expense of her family's well-being. This episode delves deeper into Lois's willingness to manipulate and exploit others when she believes she's fighting for a cause. The episode begins with the Griffin family vacationing at Quagmire's cabin, which, in true Family Guy fashion, is filled with sexual traps and devices. After spending time enjoying nature, including singing campfire songs and swimming in the lake, the family notices that something is terribly wrong. Their hair begins to fall out. Upon further investigation, they discover that the lake has been polluted with toxic waste, courtesy of the Cog oil refinery. Outraged by the environmental destruction, Lois decides to confront Mayor Adam West. However, she quickly discovers that West is not only aware of the pollution, but actively benefits from it, receiving free oil for his hair in exchange for allowing the refinery to continue dumping waste.
Next election, I'm gonna run against you, and I'm gonna win.
This revelation sparks a fire in Lois, and she boldly declares that she will run for mayor in the next election, vowing to clean up the lake and end the corruption in Quahog. Lois's determination to win the election starts off with good intentions. But as the campaign progresses, it becomes clear that she is willing to engage in underhanded tactics to secure victory. Lois begins her campaign in the traditional way, going door to door and delivering thoughtful speeches. However, her well-prepared answers fail to impress the largely ignorant voters of Quahog, and she finds herself trailing in the polls. Frustrated by her lack of progress, Lois decides to adopt a more cynical approach, using fear-mongering and lies to sway voters. In one of the most absurd moments of the episode, Lois claims that Adolf Hitler, yes, the same Adolf Hitler who died more than 80 years ago, is planning a terrorist attack on Quahog in collaboration with the Legion of Dome. This baseless and fear-inducing statement successfully garners her the support she needs to win the election, but it also highlights Lois's willingness to compromise her integrity for the sake of power. After winning the election, Lois does follow through on her promise to clean up the lake, but her moral compass quickly deteriorates as she indulges in the perks of being mayor. She begins using taxpayer money to fund extravagant shopping sprees, buying expensive handbags and designer clothes with little regard for the people she's supposed to be serving. When Brian confronts her about her unethical behavior, Lois dismisses his concerns, showing just how deeply she has been corrupted by power. In an especially shocking moment, Lois accepts a bribe from the oil company in exchange for allowing them to continue polluting the lake. In return for her compliance, she receives a luxurious fur coat, which she values more than the health and safety of Quahog's residents. This episode demonstrates how easily Lois can be swayed by material wealth and power, even at the expense of her original noble cause. Eventually, Lois has a moment of clarity when she realizes that she has become the very thing she set out to destroy. Overcome with guilt, she attempts to rectify her mistakes, but by then it's too late. Mayor West reclaims his position, the lake remains polluted, and Lois vows never to go into politics again. This episode is a prime example of how Lois's ambition and desire for control can lead her down a dark path, ultimately compromising her morals for personal gain. In Farmer Guy, Lois's behavior takes a darker turn as she becomes involved in a drug empire. The episode begins with the Griffins deciding to move to the countryside after crime rates in Quahog skyrocket. Peter buys a farmhouse and quickly embraces the rural lifestyle, while Lois remains skeptical about their new surroundings. However, things take a dramatic twist when the family discovers a meth lab hidden in the attic of their new home.
You guys, I think this is a meth lab.
Rather than report the illegal operation to the authorities, Peter suggests turning the meth lab into a family business to solve their financial problems. At first, Lois is hesitant, but Peter's persuasion and the lure of easy money eventually convince her to go along with the plan. This decision marks a turning point for Lois as she is drawn deeper into the criminal world. The family begins manufacturing meth, and what started as a desperate attempt to make ends meet soon spirals out of control. Lois, once the voice of reason, becomes fully complicit in the operation, showing just how easily her moral boundaries can be compromised when faced with financial hardship. As the meth production continues, the Griffin household descends into chaos. Peter starts using the product himself, becoming increasingly erratic, while Meg is found passed out on the floor from drug use. Stewie, the baby of the family, experiences physical side effects from being around the meth lab, with his teeth falling out as a result of exposure to the drugs. Despite the clear dangers and the toll the operation is taking on her family, Lois remains focused on making money. Her willingness to risk her children's health and safety for financial gain is a stark reminder of how far she's willing to go when pushed to her limits. The situation becomes even more dire when the news reports a spike in meth use in Quahog, directly linked to the Griffin's operation. Eventually, Brian returns from agriculture school, only to find his family deeply entrenched in the drug trade. Horrified by what he sees, Brian confronts Lois and Peter, urging them to shut down the operation before it's too late. However, it takes a catastrophic event to convince Lois that they need to change course. A failed chemical reaction causes the farmhouse to explode, leaving the family homeless and forcing them to move back to Spooner Street. While Lois ultimately decides to leave the drug trade behind, the fact that she was willing to engage in such dangerous and illegal behavior in the first place is a testament to her increasingly psychotic tendencies. This episode highlights how easily Lois can be swayed by money and power, even when it puts her family in jeopardy. In this episode, Lois's obsessive nature is taken to new heights as she becomes fixated on winning the Customer of the Week award at her favorite local coffee shop. The episode begins with a glimpse into Lois's daily life, which is far from glamorous. Her morning routine includes talking to her best friend Alexa, the voice-activated assistant, and trying to remove Chris's foot from the toilet, an image that perfectly captures the chaotic nature of her household. For Lois, the coffee shop is a rare escape from the chaos of her home life. She visits the shop regularly, befriending the baristas and making small talk with them as though they were part of her extended family. However, Lois's friendly demeanor takes a dark turn when she sets her sights on the Customer of the Week award, a seemingly insignificant accolade that quickly becomes an unhealthy obsession for her. Despite her best efforts, Lois is passed over for the award, and the honor goes to another customer, Lester. Devastated by the rejection, Lois becomes consumed by the need to prove that she deserves the title. She goes to extreme lengths to win the barista's favor, buying their artwork and learning everything she can about their personal lives. Her efforts, however, continue to fall short, and the award remains out of reach. Frustrated and humiliated, Lois decides to take matters into her own hands. She learns that a bottle of shampoo was stolen from the Airbnb she rented for a family vacation, and that the owner of the house gave her a 0-star review.
The owner of the house gave us a 0-star review.
Determined to clear her name and win back the Customer of the Week award, Lois devises a plan to get revenge on the Airbnb host. Lois's plan involves getting a job as a DoorDash driver, delivering food to customers around the island in an attempt to raise her driver rating. Her ultimate goal is to make a delivery to the Airbnb host, Doy, and blackmail her into changing the review. When Lois finally gets the opportunity to deliver to Doy's house, she shows up at the door with a sickly sweet smile, drenched head to toe from the rain. In a chilling scene, Lois hints that she will give Doy a poor rating on DoorDash unless she changes her negative review on Airbnb. The situation takes an even darker turn when Lois admits that she intentionally stole the bottle of shampoo during her stay because it brought her a small sense of joy in her otherwise mundane life.
Shampoo.
You did.
You're damn right I did. I was always gonna steal that shampoo, and do you know why?
Her admission reveals just how deeply unbalanced she has become, as she is willing to manipulate and threaten others for the sake of validation. This episode showcases Lois's obsessive nature and her willingness to go to extreme lengths to win even the most trivial of accolades. Lois's kleptomania reaches new heights in this episode as she becomes addicted to the thrill of stealing. What begins as petty shoplifting soon escalates into grand theft auto as Lois's compulsive need to steal takes over her life. The episode starts innocently enough, with Lois grocery shopping for the family. However, when she realizes she doesn't have enough money to pay for a joint of ham, she slips it into her bag without a second thought. Initially, Lois's kleptomania seems harmless, and she even manages to convince Brian that her actions were justified. However, as the episode progresses, Lois's stealing habit spirals out of control. She begins stealing clothes, jewelry, and even a car muffler from an auto parts store. The thrill of shoplifting gives Lois a rush that she hasn't felt in a long time, and she becomes increasingly brazen in her actions. Brian, growing suspicious of Lois's behavior, follows her to the auto parts store and catches her in the act of stealing. Horrified by what he sees, Brian tries to convince Lois to return the stolen items and make amends for her actions. However, Lois is caught by Joe Swanson, the town's police officer, before she has a chance to return the goods. In a desperate attempt to escape, Lois tries to run, but Joe is too good at his job, and Lois is arrested on the spot. In court, the judge is initially lenient with Lois, offering her a reduced sentence since it's her first offense. However, when the judge's gavel goes missing and Lois is revealed as the culprit, her sentence is extended to 2 years in state prison. Peter, unable to control his frustration, argues with the judge, earning Lois an additional year behind bars. Life in prison proves to be a difficult adjustment for Lois, as she struggles to adapt to her new surroundings. Meanwhile, Peter learns that living without Lois is far more challenging than he anticipated. The house falls into disarray, and Stewie drags around a dirty diaper so heavy that it leaves a trail behind him. Realizing that they can't survive without Lois, Peter and the family hatch a plan to break her out of jail. In a ridiculous turn of events, the Griffins successfully break Lois out of prison and flee to a place called Asian Town. While the name is politically incorrect and outdated, The show uses it for comedic purposes as the Griffins attempt to start a new life on the run. Peter takes a job as a sumo wrestler, but his appearance on television blows their cover, leading Joe and the police force to track them down. In the end, Lois is faced with a choice: run and remain a fugitive, or save Joe from falling into the sewers. In a rare moment of selflessness, Lois chooses to save Joe, and her act of heroism clears her of all charges. However, the episode ultimately reinforces the idea that Lois has a pattern of engaging in reckless and criminal behavior without facing any real consequences. Her kleptomania and subsequent escape from prison are just another example of how far Lois is willing to go to satisfy her impulsive desires. This episode takes Lois's psychotic tendencies to a disturbing new level as she volunteers to teach sex education at Chris's school after the program is defunded. When the school switches to an abstinence-only curriculum, Lois becomes frustrated with the new approach and decides to take matters into her own hands. She begins teaching the students about safe sex and the importance of using protection, much to the dismay of the parents and school administrators. However, things take a turn for the worse when Peter barges into the classroom and starts offering his own bizarre advice on the subject. Between Lois's straightforward approach and Peter's ridiculous contributions, the students are left more confused than ever. Eventually, the class is cancelled, and a reverend is brought in to teach abstinence as the only option. The abstinence seminar proves to be highly effective, as most of the students, including Meg, take a vow of celibacy. Meg even brings home a book filled with anti-sex propaganda, which convinces Peter to take a vow of abstinence as well. This decision creates tension between Peter and Lois, as Lois becomes increasingly frustrated with her husband's refusal to engage in intimacy. In a shocking moment, Lois attempts to seduce Peter, but he refuses, citing his commitment to abstinence. What happens next is deeply unsettling. Lois, unwilling to take no for an answer, forces herself onto Peter. The scene is played for laughs, but it's clear that Lois's actions amount to sexual assault. Despite the gravity of the situation, the show glosses over the incident, and Lois faces no consequences for her behavior. After successfully breaking Peter's vow of abstinence, Lois sets her sights on Meg, determined to convince her daughter to abandon the celibacy pledge as well. Together, Peter and Lois break into the school and expose the Reverend's lies about abstinence, offering the students a more balanced perspective on sex education. However, the episode's conclusion leaves a sour taste as it fails to address the serious issues raised by Lois's actions. This episode highlights Lois's selfishness and willingness to cross ethical boundaries when her desires are not met. Her assault on Peter is a stark reminder of how far she's willing to go to get what she wants, even at the expense of her own family's well-being. Lois's midlife crisis takes center stage in this episode as she undergoes a dramatic transformation after Peter repeatedly makes comments about her age. Feeling insecure about her appearance, Lois decides to reinvent herself, adopting a younger, wilder persona. She gets highlights, buys a new car, and starts dressing like a college student, much to the shock of her family. Peter initially enjoys the changes, especially since Lois's new lifestyle involves a lot of partying, reckless behavior, and even drug use. However, it quickly becomes clear that Lois's midlife crisis is spiraling out of control. She becomes obsessed with maintaining her youth, even going so far as to get a lower back tattoo, much to the dismay of her children. The episode reaches its peak when Lois attends a Justin Bieber concert and manages to get backstage. In a deeply uncomfortable scene, Lois attempts to seduce the teenage pop star, despite the clear age difference and the fact that Justin is not interested. Lois's advances are cringeworthy, and the situation becomes even more uncomfortable when Peter arrives just in time to stop her. Despite nearly crossing a serious line, Lois faces no real consequences for her behavior. Peter reassures her that he loves her for who she is, not for the younger version she's trying to be. The episode ends with Lois reverting to her old self, but the damage has already been done. This episode showcases Lois's deep insecurities and how they can drive her to make poor decisions in an attempt to feel young and desirable again. In this episode, Lois's psychotic tendencies reach new heights when she develops an inappropriate attraction to Meg's teenage boyfriend, Justin. The episode begins with Meg introducing Justin to her family, much to their surprise. Meg, who is usually the target of ridicule and neglect, has finally found a boyfriend, and she's eager to show him off. Justin, for his part, is polite and charming, even complimenting Lois on her appearance. It's this compliment that sets off a disturbing chain of events, as Lois becomes infatuated with the idea of being desired by someone younger. She begins fantasizing about a relationship with Justin and even goes so far as to give him a card with her menstrual cycle on it, signaling when she's available. The situation escalates when Meg leaves to pick up her grandfather from the airport, leaving Justin alone with Lois. Lois seizes the opportunity and makes a move on Justin, who is both surprised and flattered by the attention. However, their encounter is interrupted when Meg returns home, forcing Lois to confront the consequences of her actions. Rather than take responsibility for her inappropriate behavior, Lois deflects the blame onto Peter, claiming that his neglect and constant criticism have made her feel unattractive and undesirable. This episode is a clear example of how Lois's need for validation can drive her to cross serious moral and ethical boundaries. Her willingness to pursue a relationship with a teenager, her daughter's boyfriend no less, shows just how deeply her narcissism and insecurities run. In this episode, Lois's darker side is revealed once again as the family moves to the countryside and discovers a meth lab in their new home. Rather than report the illegal operation, Lois and Peter decide to turn the meth lab into a family business to solve their financial problems. What begins as a desperate attempt to make ends meet soon spirals out of control as the family becomes deeply involved in the drug trade. Lois's involvement in the meth operation is particularly disturbing as she becomes more focused on making money than on the well-being of her family. The situation reaches a breaking point when Peter starts using the product, and Meg is found passed out on the floor. Despite these red flags, Lois remains determined to keep the business going. Eventually, a failed chemical reaction causes the house to explode, forcing the family to move back to Spooner Street. While Lois ultimately decides to leave the drug trade behind, the fact that she was willing to engage in such dangerous and illegal behavior in the first place is a testament to her increasingly psychotic tendencies. This episode highlights how easily Lois's moral compass can be compromised when faced with financial strain. Finally, we arrive at the #1 spot, which features Lois's most psychotic and disturbing behavior to date. In this episode, Meg introduces her new boyfriend, Justin, to the family, and Lois quickly becomes infatuated with the teenage boy. Despite the clear age difference, Lois begins fantasizing about a romantic relationship with Justin, and her thoughts quickly turn into actions. Lois makes several inappropriate advances toward Justin, eventually giving him a card with her menstrual cycle on it to let him know when she's available. When Meg leaves to pick up her grandfather from the airport, Lois seizes the opportunity to act on her desires, making a move on Justin while they're alone. What's particularly disturbing about this episode is the way Lois rationalizes her behavior. When Meg confronts her about making out with her boyfriend, Lois apologizes, but quickly shifts the blame onto Peter, claiming that his neglect pushed her to seek attention from Justin. This deflection of responsibility is a recurring theme in Lois's behavior, as she often refuses to take accountability for her actions. Despite the severity of the situation, Lois faces no real consequences for her behavior. Instead, the episode ends with Lois and Peter reconciling, and the whole ordeal is brushed under the rug. This episode serves as a prime example of Lois's deep-seated narcissism and her willingness to cross serious ethical lines in pursuit of validation and attention. In conclusion, Lois Griffin's character has evolved over the years from a typical suburban mom to a deeply flawed and often psychotic individual. These 10 episodes highlight some of her most outrageous and disturbing actions, showcasing just how far she's willing to go to satisfy her own desires. Whether it's locking her husband in the attic, starting a drug empire, or seducing her daughter's teenage boyfriend, Lois has proven time and time again that there are no limits to her behavior when she's pushed to her breaking point. Lois's actions often blur the line between comedy and genuine psychopathy, as she repeatedly crosses moral and ethical boundaries without facing any real consequences. Her selfishness, need for validation, and willingness to engage in reckless and dangerous behavior make her one of the most complex and unpredictable characters in Family Guy. While her actions are often played for laughs, they also serve as a reminder of how easily power, insecurity, and desire can corrupt even the most seemingly normal individuals. Subscribe, like, and comment the video for more content.